Okay, well, thank you so much for the introduction, Molly. We're super excited to be here, especially because we're here in person as discussed, and exchange more afterwards. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who has joined. I saw in the chat a couple of people from Germany joined, so what a way to spend a Friday afternoon or Friday night, 6 o'clock there. So very honored, but it also increases the pressure. I've got to make it worthwhile now, right? So let's start with a little introduction of ourselves. My name is Mona Gerard. I'm a senior training specialist with Global Industrial at Ecolab. I am originally from Cologne in Germany and just recently relocated to the United States, now based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. My degree is a master's in vocational education and business management, and I like to recharge my batteries with gardening, hiking, and painting. And that's it. Handing it over to Greg.
Thank you, Mona. Welcome, everyone. It's just a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Fredrickson for hosting us and inviting us to participate. My name is Greg Smith. I'm with Ecolab. I currently have responsibility for our global training offerings from a safety perspective. So a very specialized training, but for a lot of folks around the world in a lot of languages, which makes it quite challenging and quite fun. My background is in environmental management and occupational health. And as you can see on the screen there, I'm a winter sports person. I really like the hockey. That's why it's nice to be up in Minneapolis. I've actually played in a 3-on-3 hockey tournament up here a few years ago with some friends. I ski a lot, and I also barbecue a lot. I like to smoke the briskets and the pork shoulders and things like that. So welcome, everyone, and hopefully we're going to have a great conversation and talk about learning.
Wonderful. Well, the next time we meet, we hold a session like this. We're going to do that in Illinois, and you're going to invite us to barbecue afterwards, right? Good. That said, what are we going to do in the next 90 minutes? Just a brief overview of the agenda. We have already started with the welcome and introduction. Then we're going to introduce you to the topic a little more and talk about different concepts that we're going to apply today. And then we're actually going to start applying, first of all, in a breakout group discussion. We've got a couple of questions prepared for you that we would like you to discuss and exchange about. And then we're actually going to use or work with practical case studies. And at the very end of the session, we're also going to share out how we as Ecolab have been approaching challenges around success measurement. And we should have several minutes at the very end also for Q&A. And that started. We would like to launch 2 polls. First question is going to be, how important is success measuring of L&D initiatives overall? And the second one's going to be, how well do we actually do with that? See first results coming in. We do. I don't think you do yet. Share it out in just a bit.
I see a bit of inversion going on here.
Okay, so we're at 81 responses, and we do have very clear tendencies already. Meeting our expectations, I want to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we're probably good to share out now. Mark or Luke. Okay, good. And I hope everyone sees the results now. And as I said, they're kind of what we expected. They're not surprising to me. So all of us agree that they're important. The majority even says they're very important. 82% of us say measuring metrics is very important. And a few of you, that's great. 38 of you say we're doing okay-ish. One says we're doing great. Wonderful. Type that into the chat who you are. We're going to connect later. But the majority of us says there is some room for improvement. That's sort of what we expected. And that's great because that's why we're here today. We're all in the same boat, and we look forward to hearing what challenges you're facing and how we can address those. So first of all, to make sure we're all on the same page, let's talk about why do we even need a measured success. It is, in short, to demonstrate effectiveness and return on investment on time and money that's being invested in. I've got a couple of numbers that the Training magazine just published a few weeks back. US training expenses in 2023 were over 100 billion. Per learner, that adds up to about $1,000 per year and 57 hours. So that is a big investment. And obviously, decision makers need to understand why they need to keep investing in our initiatives. So how do we measure that? What do we want to report out? Ideally, we show improvement at different levels. It starts with improved skills and improved satisfaction. We ideally increase productivity and are able to share that out and measure it. An increased knowledge transfer, greater retention rates, especially in current days where the market situations have changed. We're going to have at the same time a better employer brand, stronger performance overall, and it all feeds up into the very most important metric, which would be business growth. And this is obviously the most important one to our decision makers and business leaders. For us as well, it's super important, though, to understand what's working well for us, what's not working well, and why. What can we do better? So that's why we're talking today. And as we said, we look forward to hearing your experiences as well. And we'd like to understand which methods have you used to capture which metrics or measures. What's your experience? What's been working well?
So please feel free to share in the chat what's working well for you. What kind of things are you measuring?
What was the total dollar amount I mentioned? Total US training expenses, 101.8 billion, according to the training magazine.
Power BI, yes, it's becoming a very powerful tool. Simple completions, forms and surveys, those sort of things. And part of that expense too is not just the cost of developing the training and maintaining the training and learning management systems. It's also the time that people take to do the training. It's time away from their jobs, away from doing their work.
That was 57 hours.
Yep. It's a lot.
Okay.
Engagement surveys. I'm scanning through the chat here. Behavioral analytics.
I see lots of people mentioning the different levels. We're going to talk about those levels more in just a bit when we introduce a couple of the concepts and models that we'll work with. Voice of customer, I see. Wonderful. So we've got
Teachbacks.
I like teachbacks. That's very powerful. Different KPIs, great.
Campaigns that solicit feedback.
Okay. Well, we've got some great experience in this group here today, and don't worry, we're going to be able to leverage that, and you'll be able to share out more as we move along. On this slide, we just gathered a couple of the most common metrics that we gather, and there should be no surprises in here. Sales growth, always very important. Net Promoter Score is a very popular one. And then we've got completion rates. You mentioned that as well. Job satisfaction, learner satisfaction, different test scores. So just, to give you some inspiration, this is what we work with. And as a rule of thumb, you need to make sure that when you identify metrics that you want to measure, they answer one of those 4 questions. Did the employees learn what they were supposed to learn? Did they apply the knowledge at work? Did they meet a business goal? And was the training worth the investment? So when you identify a KPI that doesn't give an answer to any of those questions, toss it, not needed. Let's look at a couple of different models. Some of you might have heard of some of those, but to some of you, those might even be new. We're going to look at the Kirkpatrick evaluation model and different models that were derived from that model. And then I was also going to introduce you to the Anderson model of learning evaluation, which was fairly new to me, a slightly different approach. They're perfectly compatible, so I'm hoping that gives you some additional inspiration. Kirkpatrick evaluation, model of training evaluation. Sorry, that's the official name. I want to make sure I point it out properly. It was developed in 1954. Donald Kirkpatrick developed it for his PhD dissertation and first published it in 1959. It was used in academia mostly until it became well known to the broader public in 1993, when Kirkpatrick actually published it in a book. And we're going to start at the bottom with the level 1 that's already mentioned in our chat. Level 1 means we measure the immediate reaction, so the direct response to a certain training initiative. Level 2 means we measure the learning of skills based on that training initiative. Level 3 describes the behavior change as a result from a certain training initiative. So that's not going to be measured immediately after the initiative, but as for, the further up you go in that pyramid, the longer it's going to take to measure results. And so behavior, you're probably going to start measuring, let's say 2 to 3 months in, maybe even 6 months after the initiative. And then level 4 is the actual results as a business impact of that specific training initiative. And how you apply this model is actually that you start from the top to the bottom, because it's very important that you identify those business results that you want to achieve first, and then take it down from there to derive all other KPIs and metrics and measures that you want to be working with as you develop those certain initiatives. Very important to point that out. The second model we want to introduce to you today is the Phillips ROI model, so Phillips Return on Investment model, and it's based on the Kirkpatrick model, as you can see here. So the first 4 levels, are very almost identical. He renamed level 4 to impact, but it describes a very similar thing to measure, and he adds level 5, which is the return on investment, which would add the cost benefit analysis. So was it even worth, as we said, the investment of that amount of money and that amount of time given the business result outcome? This was first published in 1980, and is one of the very common models as well that we work with in this area. A third model that is built on the original concept of Kirkpatrick is Kaufman's 5-level of evaluation. Again, very similar, but slightly different. This one was developed in 1994. And the 2 most important differences are that at the very bottom, level 1, Kaufman distinguished between A, resources and materials, so input, and B, delivery and facilitation, so output. So that's a very important distinction, which I like a lot. I find that very impactful to differentiate those 2. And then as a level 5, he added societal contribution. And when I first started working with that, it felt a little clunky, and I was wondering what might that mean. And then it hit me, and I was like, duh, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example. We've been doing so much around DE&I, and those obviously or hopefully have a societal contribution, right? So those initiatives could be measured with that model in level 5. Or on the other hand, for example, community service, if you include that in an initiative, that could also be measured with level 5 of Kaufman's model. No reaction. Here we go. Okay, so just to summarize, all 3 models are very similar. They're all based on the same idea, on the same concept. Depending on the initiative, you can choose which one applies best. Very important, you don't apply each level for each initiative that you're doing. As the pyramid would indicate, you start at the bottom and you apply the first level, level 1, with the reaction.
Or that's the slides.
Input and processes. Oh, I thought it felt a little clunky here. Sorry. Okay.
There you go.
Wonderful. Well, I didn't show anything new. It was just the summary slide, so you didn't miss a whole lot. And yeah, I was just going to say, what is our recommendation? When do you switch? Level 1, you'll use the most. So level 1, it's recommended to use for all programs. Level 2, you'll use for hard skills programs. Level 3, he would say for strategic programs. So we mostly, for example, use it for leadership programs. And level 4, you should use for big organizational initiatives that actually cost you over $50,000. Adding to that, I wanted to introduce to you the Anderson's model of learning evaluation. As I said, it was fairly new to me when I started looking into this a little more. And what Anderson, this is a fairly new model. It was built or developed in 2006. And what Anderson detected was that there is a strong discrepancy in lots of companies between business strategies and business goals and learning strategies and learning goals. And that's where he wanted to make an impact with this model. So he says, first of all, what we need to make sure is that we go in a helicopter view and we align those two strategies in all the goals. Because naturally, he said, when goals are aligned and when strategies are aligned, all the individual initiatives feeding up to our learning strategy should have that very same impact on the business goals, and we should all be headed into the same direction. So once you're in helicopter view and you've ensured that everyone's walking into the same direction, he assesses the contribution of learnings. That again is going to look at the individual initiatives similar to the previous models based on the Kirkpatrick concept. And after that, you're going to establish the most relevant approaches that actually feed into your business goals and business strategy. What I like about this is that it's, to me, to us, it's very complementary to the Kirkpatrick concept of evaluation. It's just adds a different level to, on a regular basis, reflect on yourself to make sure we're all going into the same direction.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mona. I mean, one of the things that I saw when because I didn't hear about the Anderson one either, but it's almost like a model you could use for your overall training strategy, whereas the Kirkpatrick models are about the particular programs that you're doing within that strategy, and maybe using both of to evaluate the big picture as well as the focus of individual efforts could be worked out to help make sure that you're achieving the business impacts that you would like. So that was one of the things that dawned on me as I was looking at this. So
absolutely,
it's quite neat to see different models and kind of take the best of the both and compare and contrast. So what we would like to do now is start our breakout group section of this, and we'll actually have 2 separate breakouts, and the groups will be about 4 to 6 people each, and you'll be in, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you'll be in the same breakout group both times. For this first breakout, it's pretty much a discussion. We'd like you to introduce yourselves and talk a bit for about 10 minutes about some of the questions we have here. Now, you don't have to go through and answer these like it's a checklist, but they're really here to kind of drive a conversation about what you're doing and share some of your experiences with trying to measure the impact of the training that you're supporting, the learning that you're developing and issuing to the people that you work with. From how do you measure success? What kinds of measures do you pick out, and those types of things. The one I'm personally particularly interested in is that third bullet. How do you connect the change back to the business results? Where can you really show correlation or even causation for the work that you're doing to the benefit that you want to achieve? And we all have obstacles of this. I mean, I come from a safety training background, and we have obstacles like translations. We have obstacles like trying to convey regulatory information in different parts of the world. What are the applications that you might experience for the efforts that you're experiencing in your efforts? So what we'd like to ask you for each of your groups, make sure you pick a spokesperson. We'll have a few of you kind of give some feedback and kind of so you can share learnings amongst the broader team. And I think we'll go from there. So I assume that you'll...
Producers ready?
Yep, the rooms are ready. I will be moving everybody shortly. Yep.
You have right now in the chat, if you didn't see it in any of the reminder emails, you've got the link to all the resources now. And please only look at the first slide at those questions. We're going to talk about the rest later.
Good point. Yeah, both sets of resources for both breakouts are there, so you'll get them in advance. But they were also provided by the email earlier that came out Thursday. Please have a great discussion, and we'll get back in about 10 minutes.
Enjoy.
So welcome back from the first breakout session. I hope everybody had a great conversation and made some new friends. So I thought we'd like to just kind of run through these questions and maybe just even share what your experiences were, what you learned, what you thought. Is there a group that would like to have their spokesperson take a first crack at sharing what their conversation was?
Greg, I will volunteer to go first. This is Stephanie Bostick.
Oh, hello,
Thanks,
Stephanie.
Greg and Mona are my friends, so I didn't want them to have to wait too long. So it seems like in my group, measuring success of our initiatives is a lot around the completions. We get a lot of data from our LMSs, and just making the connection between who's enrolled, who's completing, who's dropping, that sort of thing. The
Very
connecting change to results question seems to be either mostly anecdotal conversations or responses to various surveys. We did have Kim, who works for a company that provides training to other businesses, and she said that they use metrics that matter and smart sheets for instructors so that they can respond more in the moment to folks who may be struggling in the classroom. And then let's see, over reporting out results. Most of it's through decks and presentations on a regular basis. And then an obstacle that we would like to know how to overcome is what is the correct data that we need to pull and report on? What is it that is really, what are those critical pieces?
Yeah, and that's the really hard part is what is the metric that's really going to be representative of the impact you're trying to achieve? And is it connectable back to the work that you're doing, the learning that you're creating, and who you're providing it to? And that's where I think the Anderson model helps a lot, but also the Kirkpatrick model, really, trying to figure out, plan for, as Mona said earlier, figure this out first before you start writing content, before you start figuring out what you're trying to do, that way. Thank you, Stephanie. Is there another group that would like to have their representative come offline and share what their conversation was about? I see Cindy has a hand raised.
Sure, I'll take my best crack at it. Yeah, we had a great group, so I'll try to capture it, and then they can add what they would like to share as well. But a few things here. We had some really wonderful tools that people shared, and then I've got a few concepts I wanted to share at the end as well. But Jean has some really cool things that she does. That she works with customers, and they have optional training, but she works with this tool, and it's called Expert Voice. And she can get some map, and she can see who's taking it and who's not with this. Well, they take this digital training, and then the map kind of lights up like a heat map, and she can see who's taking it, who's not. And the funny thing is that they also get swag, and then as she gets feedback, so often she gets feedback on the swag instead of the training. So just a little FYI on that. And so that was kind of interesting. And then Mirella does, all things project. So she looks at the value of the project, the Lean Sigma, the time to completion, and all things projects, and gets a lot of information about that with all the projects and does the project management. And Anu had used something, and Anu, please correct me, either come off mute or put it in the chat if I don't get this right, but I believe it's called Power BI, and looks at who the workforce is and how it connects, and had that. And then
Yeah, the Power BI tool, that's a great way to transparently represent all the data to all your interested parties about what you're doing. It's a great way to compile it and present it.
And then Bronte, she also worked with their workforce. She said that she's constantly getting feedback, and she said I thought this was really a great quote. She said feedback is just a gift, that she sees it as, and she just is really always doing analysis to find out what's working and what's not. And my thought is, I really take something as a quote from Jim Kirkpatrick. I would, my thought is when I do things, I don't like to see training so much as an event, as more to continue to see it as, it's ongoing. And when you're looking for level 3 results, a lot of times you have to continue to do coaching into level 3. So not just see coaching as, oh, let's do an event and then we're done. So you do this, maybe you do a lunch and learn, like I'm DISC certified, and don't just do it as a lunch and learn, but you may need to do that and then continue to do coaching people ongoing. And if you just do it into an event and we did training and we're done. I mean, if you think about like Evan Harsley's forgetting curve and how quickly people forget, but I like to think of my training as it can't be an event. It needs to be ongoing, and you need to keep things going. And that's my 2 cents worth. And
That's awesome.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, kind of a discrete activity versus a continuous process, right? And
yeah,
making it tough. And that probably has a better ability to integrate it to what you do every day, as opposed to a discrete event that might just separate you from what you do every day. Should we have time, do you think, Mona, for one more? But yeah, let's do one more. Let's see if somebody else has something to share too. We're getting some really interesting ideas.
Got Stephen raise his hand.
Yeah, we our group had some good information, some good ideas. Again, a lot of level 1 usage to get that initial feedback from our learners. Attrition was mentioned as something to monitor. I know my group monitors attrition during training, but and I'm sorry I didn't write people's names down, but attrition being measured after training, so 60, 90, 200 days post training, to see how effective and how these employees stuck it out. Were they successful? Things along those lines. Also talked about sentiment scores and being able to monitor sentiment after training, which brought about one initiative that my team ran last year, where we had some people that were struggling with sentiment scores, both sentiment and a metric we call first call resolution. And we developed some refresher training around those metrics, measured those KPIs before training and after training, and noted anywhere from 3 to 8% improvement after. So, and that was really using Power BI was one of the things that helped us look at those metrics. And another option was for sales training. Really, some of the KPIs looked at really focused around volume and speed, volume of sales, and how quickly we could turn those around. We didn't really get to obstacles, but I will say personally, just getting access to those KPIs, in our case through Power BI, sometimes our customers hold on to that pretty tightly. So getting access to view and see those metrics so we can make that impact can be a little challenging.
It certainly can. It certainly can. Well, what's neat, and what I'm seeing about all these is that people are working a lot of ways, and they're kind of really good at like the kind of the base of the pyramid from the Kirkpatrick model, those kind of reaction type feedbacks. And then, but I think a lot of folks are really trying to get to the top of that pyramid and trying to measure the impact using the tools they have in place, like Power BI and other ones, and tying it back to the metrics you use to measure the performance of your business. I think this is really exciting. A lot of people are trying to do that. So should we take back the screen, Mona? And we'll about get ready. I think
Thank
Mark,
you, everybody.
go to our yes, thank you so much. We're going to go to our next exercise, which is a little bit more detailed. You're going to get a little bit more time. And it's popping up. And this is about applying your experience. So what we have here are 2 scenarios. And what we'd like to do is, let me go to the next slide. No, go back to the first one. So what we'd like to do is we have 2 scenarios. All people have access to both scenarios. There's 2 documents, scenario 1, scenario 2. But we'd like to ask that for your group, if the leader, you'll be in the same groups as you were before, correct, Mark? But if the leader of your group,
I think we just changed that because I see a comment from Luke in the chat, right?
Uh-oh.
Right, Luke? So for the next breakout room, groups that have an odd number will be working on scenario 1, and groups that have an even number will be working on scenario 2.
Okay. I thought we were going to do it by birthday.
Right.
Sorry.
All good. We're super flexible here.
Is that good? Mark? Yeah. So if you're, well, let's do it this way. If your breakout group is have an odd number, please do scenario 1. If your breakout group has an even number, do scenario 2. I think that's the way we'll work it. We'll keep it simple that way. You will have 20 minutes to go over the exercise if you go to the next slide. So scenario 1 is about the impact of safety training, and it provides a context of what safety training impacts it has and the challenges that it may face, and the choice of metrics you may need to use to see did that training actually achieve what you wanted to do from a safety perspective. The second one is about a sales program and designing and building a program and how you communicate that effectiveness and the results, much like we heard in the last person. So from a task, please review the exercise. Take a few minutes to read through it. It gives you some context, but it also provides some discussion questions at the end of each exercise so that you can have the same kind of conversation amongst your team. And we'll come back and share your thoughts after we go rejoin and have a similar conversation. You have about 20 minutes, so there's a little bit of time for you to review and more time to really delve in deeply and get a conversation about what's going on. As you rejoin your room, a message says rejoining breakout rooms, room X will appear on your screen.
Right.
So have at it and have a great discussion. We'll look forward to talking back in about 20 minutes.
Odd numbers, scenario 1, even numbers, scenario 2. Enjoy, have fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you for taking the time to review those exercises. Maybe we'll start with number 1 first. As you might have expect, I was very interested in the safety training one, that being my background. I never, Mona's the learning professional. I'm the safety fellow. But I wanted to hear what you folks thought. So is there a team that would like to share their conversation and kind of talk about what they discussed? Is there a group that would like to come offline that did the safety training one? Chelsea, that was the first hand I saw pop up.
Perfect. I can talk. So when we talked about this, and some of the companies that the folks in my group worked for use the safety training as, yes, 100%, this is what makes our safety so strong. And if people don't do the safety training, then that can contribute to safety issues. And if they have the safety issues, then it refers back to, did you do your safety training? What do we need to do to better help and support you? But then we also talked about other things can attribute to safety results and injury results, not just based on the safety training itself. And so we talked a lot about that in the first time we talked as well, that there are so many things that can attribute to it that it's hard for learning and development to 100% say, yes, my training impacted this result. And I think that's one of the challenges that we all talked about was how does learning and development ever say 100% my training impacted that result? Because there's so many other things that attribute to it.
Definitely, that is the big challenge. You kind of hinted at something else too, is that oftentimes when there is a problem, our first answer as a solution is to go back to the training, and that might not have been really the case too. So that kind of works both ways. That's a great point.
Yep, and I think so many people do, well, we need more training. We need training. They're the ones that can take care of it, when that may not actually be the root of the cause.
Exactly. It's a great thing, but it's also kind of a scapegoat in a way too. I saw Sarah had her hand up as well.
Yeah, we talked a lot about benchmarking and figuring out like what is the baseline that obviously we want 0 injuries. That is the ultimate goal, is 0 injuries. But like, what is the baseline that we're starting at and what we're trying to improve upon? Is it severity of injuries, types of injuries, and also doing some root cause analysis of those injuries on, was training a factor in why they were injured, or was it a piece of equipment that malfunctioned? Was it, a car accident that the driver was not the cause of? but getting that baseline to understand like what can we impact with the training is important. And then also what is the cost to, the emotional cost to those who are injured, but also measuring what is the financial cost to the company when there is an injury, from a medical expenses and workers' comp standpoint, so that we can really measure the financial impact of the improvement because of the training, because that can really help to, if we need to ask for more money, to make sure that it's a clear return on investment in the future.
Awesome. I see a lot more hands up now too. Thank you, Sarah. Denise, I know you. Saw your hand up.
So our group, we have representatives from the healthcare industry and also from manufacturing called Repairify, and I am with Ecolab. So we actually focused on an initiative that our company has done, and through what's called World Safety Day. So we talked about how we started 3 years ago rolling out the courses with a baseline course, so to speak, that our team, Greg Smith, developed, and that was Stop Work Authority. So that was the basis for the continuing of World Safety Day courses that, although not required, which was a topic of conversation, we hope have been changing behavior and changing the culture and hopefully reducing injuries. So we talked about how we can tie that. What would be good is to, now that we're going to do a fourth one, the group was talking more about why we would make something required or not make it required. And again, how to tie that back to whether or not somebody has had less injuries, or have they, for example, not gotten into an accident. So this was a really organic discussion. We have one member of our group who's currently re-looking at compliance training and i.e. required training, and trying to consider other ways and getting engagement. So
yeah, that's definitely a hard part.
Right, and I did use the real world example of the courses that your team developed, Greg, because I also have an idea that I'll pitch to you after the call on how we can measure it, because we brought up the comment that for all three of these, for example, maybe, and let's say I'm in a customer facing role, I might not have completed all three of those. But we also know, and we've had discussions, that it has changed behaviors, and so we need to try to that the question was, how do we is the behavior that we're looking at only less injuries, or there are other behaviors that we would like to measure?
Excellent. Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's not just one course; it's a lot of courses. Thank you, Denise. And I think we probably, from a time perspective, should move to the next exercise.
Yeah.
We're under the. So let's move on from safety. But if you have any thoughts, please forward them along in the chat. What we'd like to do is go to the second group about sales training and developing a program around that, and actually projecting that to making a case to take it more broadly around the world. So why don't we save a couple of people come off mute to talk about the second scenario. I see Heather Green has her name up. Hand up. Hello, Heather.
Hi. So one of the things we talked a bit about was, first of all, aligning with the greater business objectives. I think for this, since it's such a huge initiative covering so many different really strong changes, you need to make sure it aligns with the be able to point to specific initiatives that it aligns to, business goals. And I think that will help with the change management, getting people to understand how it's going to be able to embrace what it's trying to do. We did talk quite a bit about change and how you need to look at different levels. You need to have change champions, especially with something like this, where there's probably going to be some resistance, specifically because they are already under a lot of stress. It seems they've got high workloads, high turnover, all these other things that these initiatives are meant to address. They're going to want to revert to old habits whenever they're under stress. So I think change management is a huge part of this one. Ongoing coaching is going to be extremely important because this is not a quick change. It's going to require a long time of checking in on people and seeing if they're still doing things, if they need to adjust. So it's a pretty complex ask, I think, to do something like this. And you have to have a really a robust long-term plan to measure it.
Definitely. Yeah, what I found interesting about this one is that where in the first exercise is about safety training, something you're already planning for and something you're always going to do. Here there was a kind of an emergent issue about retention, and you're attacking an emergent challenge. So it kind of drives maybe the thought process a little bit differently. Jane, I see Jane's hand is up.
Yep.
Okay.
I echo a lot of what Heather said. In our group, we talked quite a bit about how we found pretty quickly that it's a big ask, and is a big topic to try to discuss. We focused a lot of our discussion on what does proficiency mean and how would we measure proficiency. So we kind of nailed down a couple proficiency measures for negotiation and conflict management skills that we thought maybe a rubric of observable behaviors would be good to use. And then the topics of business and financial acumen and strategic agility being more, less behavior and more knowledge and thinking skills. We thought for the training measurement, maybe a written assessment. But then we got talking about ongoing, the idea of ongoing coaching being super important. And really the business results, we're wanting to look at supporting these salespeople in having courageous conversations to roll out the price increase and retain customers. So that was really what we're thinking that this training program needs to set them up for, and set them up for success in that way. And honestly, that is about as far as we got in the time that we had allowed. We really were struggling to shift from measuring proficiency in the training to looking at measuring business results, and then we ran out of time. So
that's really the hard part, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Making that connection. I think we're running tight on time. I think we have time for one more comment from one more team about the second scenario. I see Aaron's name had come up. We'll take one more.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we noticed right off the bat was that really there's two separate audiences here. One is kind of the seasoned employee who is kind of getting everything thrusted upon them because the workforce is down. And then the other is we have new sales employees who may not have the same experience level. So really we thought about this within that, guys, that there's two different approaches we have to take here. One size doesn't fit all for sure. But then we started thinking about, well, we have these 4 modules that were kind of pre-planned out for us, and what are the things that we could do to measure those, whether or not those modules are effective. And so we came up with things like, mock sales calls for negotiation skills, especially for the newer associates, right? Giving them that practical experience of making a sales call, quote unquote, and getting that immediate feedback, and also giving us insight into, where do we need to improve, where are we, where are these individuals strong at, how can we get them coaches. Coaching was huge for this, right? As everyone else mentioned as well. How do we get them the right coaches to really hone those skills? There's a huge impetus of time here. How do we make sure that we're making impactful change and we're measuring these things quickly? So we wanted to look at as much data as possible. So we want to do pre and post training proficiency. What are the types of assessments that we can come up with to test out new associates as well as those seasoned associates to see where they're at and where we can make those improvements, since the workforce has dwindled so drastically. And we know that we've got to not only get pricing increase, but we have to make that case for the global business scale. And then just one last thing, we talked a lot about customer feedback. Ultimately, we thought a couple of these different modules really could relate back to what does the customer perceive from the interactions that they have with us. Are we getting complaints? If we are, how are we handling it, right? That's part of the negotiation skills and the agility. Are we retaining customers? Are we selling more to the customers, which is the overall business goal, right? Is to sell more. So how do we capture that customer feedback using tools like metrics that matter or user voice or any other of those tools to really give us a clear indication of how our sales reps are performing in the view or the eyes of our customer?
Yeah, those, again, all great points. And it seemed like a common theme here about looking at the different ways to kind of figure out what's going on and what's happening. If we want to go to back to our presentation, we're tight on time, so I'm going to move quickly. Thank you for taking the time to review those and share your thoughts. We're capturing all those thoughts as you saw. We'd also just like to take a little bit of a moment to share some of the experiences that we have had, both Mona and myself. And so I want to talk a little bit about the impact of safety training from a personal experience. So, we all went through COVID. We all had a lot of experience with COVID in the business as well as in our personal lives. One of the ones that we saw in Ecolab was that as work stopped in the spring of 2020, we could no longer see our customers and people really stopped working. What happens though when you stop working is that you don't have a lot of opportunity for incidents and injuries. And we saw our numbers drop precipitously, which is awesome, but we weren't working. We weren't out there with our customers. The following year, when we all went back to work and things opened back up in the spring, people got busy. People are going back to go to market and injuries increased because the opportunities increased. But we thought, well, why shouldn't we be able to perform the same as before? And so what we did was an action to take a particular segment of our group, about 2,800 employees, that took 2 courses. And what was amazing about this, and I kind of go back to Aaron's comment about time, is that they all took them in a very short period of time. You could see the progression of the employees, that the uptake of the training was very quickly, only over a couple of months. And if you go to the next slide, we saw some results right away. In fact, in a very short time, we were able to see an impact on their engagement, some of that level 3 at the learning and behavior, as well as a reduction in injury rates in level 4 right away. But the problem was there truly a correlation? Was there truly a causality? And this is where the time factor came in. We're looking at it as, hey, it was such a short period of time. There was no other effort that was going on that could have impacted these results this way. So therefore, it must have been the training. Maybe that's a bit of wishful thinking. Maybe that's just a correlation. But the timing, as Aaron pointed out, is a kind of a key factor. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mona so that she can have her.
Right, thank you. And I want to try to make this very quick. So we've been measuring the success of a global leadership workshop, and we've been focusing on level 3 measurements. How have we been doing this? We capture at different points in time. We capture different feedback from different people in the direct environment of the participants. So before the workshop even starts, we collect a baseline from the team. We reconnect with the participants right after the workshop and 8 weeks after the workshop. And then 3 months later, we collect feedback from team members again to be able to compare, and self-assessment from the participants. We share all this out in a Power BI. Lots of different people have lots of different access. So they can actually for themselves also evaluate the metrics that they're interested in. And I'm going to show you briefly what that would look like. There's no confidential data on here. So we've got different tabs at the top with all the different dashboards for the different target groups. You've got filtering options to see, to drill into different regions, see how people have been developing across a certain region. You can also choose specific sessions to maybe even compare facilitator impact, and you can look into the individual results as well. And then it's pretty straightforward, and you can already see a development here with regards to the different surveys that were captured, that it's slightly moving the bar towards more green, which is great. And so that's how we've been working for one of our big global leadership programs. I'm not going to go into this. We're going to share out the presentation later. So if you want to look at that more, let's focus on summarizing best practices here in the last 1 to 2 minutes. Have a reasonable number of KPIs that are connected to your business strategy. Very important. Identify those before you start developing your training. Plan your data collection ahead of time. Make sure that you've got a structured plan behind all of this. Customize it to the target audience and the overall goal of that initiative. And most importantly, for us, act on your findings. If you detect an improvement need, if you detect something that needs to change, or a great success that you want to celebrate, or just give kudos maybe to certain people, certain facilitators, please act on the feedback that you're seeing. Last call out for today. I'm not going to go through, where is it? Not going to go through all the text here. Let's focus on the difference between causality and correlation, and that we keep that in mind. If you look at the bottom right, you're not going to die from a shark attack just because you eat ice cream in the summer. So next time that you evaluate metrics, please be sure that you keep that in mind. Are we talking about causality, or are we talking about correlation? And that said, if you want to stay in, we've got, Greg and I have some time for questions, but I think before we have people drop off, Molly, you wanted to share something about how we can keep this discussion going, right?
Yes, that would be, thank you both very much, and everybody else too. What we're really hoping to do is to be able to keep a community alive as far as this whole topic of measurement. And so we will be sure to follow up in our thank you message and in perhaps some other messaging and newsletters and such about being able to carry on the discussion and have set up some kind of a cadence of meetings or a forum of some kind to be able to keep this alive, keep the talk going.
Wonderful. And I just want to point out again that one person at the very beginning in the first poll that said, I'm doing great at measuring learning initiatives. Please reach out to me, LinkedIn, drop me a message. I want to connect.
Very good.
Any questions?
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the contributions and the sharing.
Thank you. Great
Thank
job.
you. Hope to see you all at future community events.